and welcome to the Tabletop Games blog topic discussion.
Faking it. We all have heard of knockoff copies of designer bags or clothing, illegal copying of DVDs and CDs, as well as cheap versions of toys that are basically replicas of products sold by big brands. After all, there is good money to be had by the makers of these fakes, as well as a good chunk of money to be saved by people who buy the copies instead of the much more expensive originals. However, what is probably less well known is that modern board games have also become a target of unscrupulous people who want to make a quick buck. So let me give you a couple of examples of games which were counterfeit in the last couple of years and the lessons we should take away. In an article in February 2018, Gamiosity wrote about how, and I quote, counterfeit copies of codenames have become an issue on resellers' websites. There's a link to this article in the description below. The Gamiosity article and the official press release by CGE show how you can identify if you have a fake copy of the game or the original. I contacted CGE about the issue and Jana Mikulova kindly replied to say that, and I quote, although it is obvious that this is a fake copy of Codenames, there is nothing we can do but ask the Chinese party to try to control the market where fake copies occur most. She goes on to say that, and I quote, we, that is CGE, are most sorry for deceived customers who get a poor quality product for their money without any support in case of missing pieces, etc. Jana also says that CGE does all it can to warn everyone, and I quote, about the risks of buying via portals such as eBay, Alibaba and other similar huge platforms. The CGE press release, there's a link in the description below, says very much the same thing and also explains that, and I quote, the majority of cases of counterfeit copies are from eBay sales. And CGE recommends that you, and again I quote, buy your games from a local or online game store. These sentiments are mirrored by Stephen Bonacore of Stronghold Games in episode 131 of the Board Games Insider podcast, and I put a link to that in the description as well, where he says, buy games from reputable retailers. Do not buy games, for instance, from eBay, ever. It is no surprise that Stephen feels so strongly about this, given that Terraforming Mars was also subject to being copied illegally, as illustrated in a Board Game Geek thread, and again there's a link in the description. However, it isn't just platforms like eBay where you might expect individuals trying to sell you fake items, but even trusted sites like Amazon have had issues. In an article in their January 2018 issue, the Tabletop Gaming magazine reports that, and I quote, the majority of publishers we spoke to pointed the finger at Amazon's third-party marketplace and Fulfilled by Amazon program, where third-party stock is stored and sent out of Amazon warehouses, for allowing online stores to freely offer illegitimate copies of games, which are often misunderstood by buyers to be vouched for by the retail giant. I put a link in the description for this article. There are other examples of counterfeit games, of course. Pandemic by Z-Man Games was mentioned in a Board Game Geek thread, again link in description, but there are many more. A lot of different publishers are affected by the issue and do what they can to warn potential customers and reduce the damage fakes can cause. After all, counterfeit copies are usually of poor quality and therefore they affect the game experience and tarnish the view that people have of a publisher or the hobby as a whole. Designers clearly also lose out on royalties for sold copies, and of course publishers lose revenue. Distributors suffer similarly. The extent of the issue shows that our hobby has become mainstream enough to make it worthwhile for unscrupulous people to create counterfeit copies of popular games in order to profit from unsuspecting customers. So the message is clear. If you buy from a large trusted website, make sure who the actual seller is and if they can be trusted. However, you're much better off supporting your friendly local game store whose stock will have come from a reputable distributor or directly from the publisher. Alternatively, buy from dedicated online board game stores. See my useful links page for those that I trust. We can all do our bit to help with this issue.
Thank you for listening to this Tabletop Games blog topic discussion podcast. Please check the description below for links mentioned in this episode, as well as to the written version of this article on the blog. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, give us some stars or leave a review. Please also tell your friends about me, and if you want to offer financial support, check out my Patreon and Ko-fi pages, links to which you'll find in the blog at tabletopgamesblog.com. So thank you again for listening, and I hope to see you again soon. This podcast is made possible by the generous help from our Patreon supporters: Royal Patron Sean Newman, the UK half of Gamelot, Castleguard David Miller of Subquark Publishing, Dice Masters James Naylor, publisher of Magnate First City, and Paul Grogan of Gaming Rules, and Shining Light Robin Kay of RuneSky Games, Sarah Reed of Resourceful Games, Tim Vernig, and Richard Simpson of We're Not Wizards.